Chair?
I'm very well, thank you.
I just want to follow up on your remarks and also about the funding of Professor Edward Holmes. He was one of the people that Anthony Fauci first contacted when the virus broke out back in January 2020. He actually contacted intelligence agencies in Australia, and he was part of an email trail that has been released to Congress. Now, his email to Christian Anderson on the day that the proximal origin was released that basically dismissed the lab leak to Christian Anderson was, sorry for the last bit, had to be done without you, pressure from on high. So he was clearly pressured from someone within the Australian government, presumably intelligence agencies. But then another email, and Professor Anderson, in discussions with this particular group, he used a tool called Genius to compare the novel coronavirus in a pendulum sequence, and it spits out a disappointing result, no significant similarity found. And indeed, Professor Edward Holmes shared another email where he was talking about a gene RMYNO2. I think this is enormous. 99% of the lab escape idea from genomics was the cleavage site insertion. I am now strongly in favour of a natural origin. So that's just something to reflect on. But the, when you say that it was a natural outbreak, or was natural, were you aware that there was a DEFUSE project that was funded by EcoHealth and Peter Daszak, who was the author of that particular paper about the proximal origin and has been in Lancet and has been since withdrawn, that basically funded research for SARS-like viruses carrying a furin cleavage site. So these guys were actually over at the Wuhan laboratory, and it was funded by Anthony Fauci and Peter Daszak. We're actually doing research into coronavirus and inserting a furin cleavage site. Now, given, and I'm happy to have your feedback there, Professor Kelly, given that evidence, are you still convinced that it was actually a natural lab leak?
So the comment I made was that the international...
sorry, not a lab leak, a natural outbreak.
Right. The comment I made was that I believe that the international consensus of experts, virologists, infectious disease physicians and others around the country and the world was that the most likely scenario was that this was a natural occurrence from animals to humans, and I still absolutely believe that. And I would again state that the overwhelming consensus of experts around the world is that that is the case.
Well, that's interesting because these emails tend to suggest that there is pressure for a cover-up, and I'll quote another one, another email where he said that he's forbidden his colleague from publishing anything pointing to a pandemic origin in Wuhan. Now, as I said, this guy is basically being funded by you. He reports to intelligence agencies. He's also somehow infiltrated himself into the Chinese Centre for Disease Control, and he's one of the first people contacted by Anthony Fauci. This is a bloke on the other side of the world, and now Anthony Fauci decides to start emailing him. I mean, don't you think that you should investigate Professor Holmes next time before we start handing out millions of dollars to him? Because I think this behaviour warrants much greater scrutiny.
Senator, I'll let the official respond. Without the documents in front of us, that's quite difficult for me to follow as chair, so I'm not sure if you're in a position to table the documents you're referring to. Professor.
So the process that we undergo to give out grants is a process based on peer review. So Professor Holmes would have applied for a grant from the NHMRC. His application would have undergone peer review from experts in the area and would have been scored, and if his score is above the line, and that means, and that's approximately 10 to 15% of the people will be above the line, so it's very, very competitive, then he will be awarded a grant from the NHMRC. We then have clear rules and regulations that apply to the administering institution that that person is a member of, and in this case it's University of Sydney, and the University of Sydney will ensure the integrity, the ethics and the application of the laws of Australia to that research. And if any of those are breached, then it's the University of Sydney that needs to be aware of that, and obviously they would then notify us, and then we would remove the grant.
Okay, thank you. That's all. Thank
Authorised G. Rennick, LNP Chermside.